So very much that's my motivation now. I just find it almost like a playground or a sandbox when I do ultra marathons, that I get to play in the sandbox of like, okay, how am I going to find a new corner of Ryan's brain, and there's going to be a new issue, and how do I solve that? So it's very much like experimental and problem solving and self-mastery, I would say.
And welcome back to For the Long Run. We have Ryan Montgomery joining for his second appearance. The first time I talked to Ryan was, looks like August of 2022. So 3 years ago, episode 227. Ryan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to chat with you again.
Of course. The first question is always a doozy. And that question is, who's Ryan?
Who is Ryan? Oh, there's so many different dimensions of this. So I'm gonna give you like the answer that people don't want, but it like depends, and it's like contextual. But as someone who just ran from my strategic sales management class to my apartment to do this podcast, I would say right now I'm very much channeling like the graduate student identity of myself. But yeah, I'm a student, I'm a runner, I run professionally, I'm an advocate, I'm a friend. So yeah, lots of different dimensions around.
We'll paint the picture from the running side of things to start. In our prior podcast conversation, we talked about your beginnings as a runner in Alaska and running a bunch of marathons early on.
Mm-hmm.
Refresh people, or for people who didn't tune into that one, how did you find running? How did running find you?
Yeah, I remember quite distinctly one of the first times I went running. So I grew up in a small town in Alaska called Craig, Alaska. I wasn't born there. I didn't spend like my early childhood, but I spent middle school years there. But that is the place and time in my life where I found running. And when I was in sixth grade, my middle school, which is it's quite small, the population of my town was, I think, 1,100 people. So my whole middle school each year would go on a camping trip. Like the whole school would go camping as like this, field trip type adventure. And I remember on that sixth grade field trip, I remember like running around the campground, just like doing laps, and like all my friends were like, "What is Ryan doing?" And I don't really remember like why I did it, but I just remember I just felt like this desire to like, I'm just gonna go run and like go run in the forest. But really since then, I've been a runner. So I've been running my whole life. I've been very drawn to the concept of seemingly impossible distances. So when I was a freshman in high school, I ran my first marathon, very slowly, but that was like this fuel of like, I want to see what I'm capable of. What is my body capable of? Just running these far distances was really attractive to me. And also in high school, I met a lot of ultra runners. I met some legends in our sport that people today might not even know about, but Ray Zahab, who's a founder of this nonprofit, Impossible to Possible. I heard stories of him running across the Sahara Desert, running Badwater, doing all these crazy things. And I just remember when I was 16, 17 at the time that I wanted to do this. So yeah, I ran my first ultra in 2015, 2016. It was the Antelope Canyon 50 miler down in Page, Arizona. And ever since then, I've just been running crazy distances, especially skewed towards the longer 100-mile plus. I think my stats right now are I've definitely run over 50, 60 ultra marathons, and about 17, 18 of them are 100 milers.
What is it about the long distance stuff? You mentioned the curiosity of like when people go far and do seemingly impossible things. Like, what is it about pushing your body and mind past, a marathon or a 5K? Like, where does that drive and curiosity come from?
My motivations have changed over time. I think when I first started, identifying as an athlete, there was very much this construct of I'm an achiever and I need validation, and like this is my way of controlling that narrative and like reaching out and using running as my avenue to like have achievement for self-satisfaction and like self validation, right? So that was very much, I would say, perhaps the earlier motivation. Over time, I think I've discovered that with trail running, I've learned so much about myself in the process. We talk about racing a lot, but it's like the day in, day out. It's like this monk lifestyle of like showing up, doing the work, working through battles, working through challenges, showing up when you don't want to. And it's this like lifestyle that has made me realize that I have this amazing intimate relationship with my body as I've fine-tuned my sport and have become a better athlete. And it's just so amazing to unlock this mind, body, and environmental connection, like as I like run outside and I feel like very connected and as part of like, the trails and the ecosystem I run in. So I think my motivation has shifted now to like, I'm interested in mastering my body. I'm interested in learning more about my body and learning more about my mind, especially. Like, we could probably have a whole podcast just about mind and like how do we crack our minds and find all the corners of our mind and how to master those to maximize performance. So, very much that's my motivation now. I just find it almost like a playground or a sandbox when I do ultra marathons, that I get to play in the sandbox of like, okay, how am I going to find a new corner of Ryan's brain, and there's going to be a new issue, and how do I solve that? So it's very much like experimental and problem solving and self mastery, I would say.
Well, fortunately, the podcast you're on is all about that and exploring the why and understanding sustainable excellence. And much of that comes from the mind, right?
Mm,
Like many people are talented enough to just do the work, and maybe they're genetically gifted, and that's good enough for a lot of people. But at some point it gets hard, and you have to struggle through that resistance and that challenge. So I'm curious to dive further into that. Like, how has it impacted the rest of your life? Like, talk to me about the ability to use your mind to move through challenging periods of life.
I mean, just like from a fundamental level, just conflict resolution and being uncomfortable is a life thing that you experience every single day. And being able to not only be comfortable with that conflict resolution, but like welcoming it and embracing it, that's just going to make you a better person in all aspects of life, like with your relationship and work, how you manage screaming kids on a plane, like all of like just everyday life things. And I was just in lecture like an hour ago. It's a sales class, and the instructor, the professor, we were talking about how when you get to like in a sales situation, that oftentimes if you're selling, you get like uncomfortable, acknowledging or getting to the nose. Like you want to avoid the nose, so you don't want to avoid obvious things or curtail them. But I would say, like, for me, as someone who goes into a race not like hoping that things won't hurt, like I think that was very much my previous Ryan, developed Ryan ultrarunner, is like, I would not want this to hurt, or I hope I don't roll my ankle, or I hope that I don't have stomach issues. Like, I go in now knowing it's happening
Right.
because I've been around the block enough that I feel like I need to anticipate all these risks so that I'm better prepared for it. And it's the same thing in my sales example I just mentioned. It's like I go into like this, a conversation with someone like knowing, anticipating that they're going to say no, and it's my objective to like get over that. Like, I welcome it. And so it's just like a different way of thinking about life, and I don't know if everyone connects those dots to all other parts of their life, but I see it every single day in my life, and how I am more capable of like problem solving. I'm more capable of like asking the questions of like, okay, if this doesn't work, now what? Okay, let's just like keep problem solving. And I had to do that, for example, in my most recent race at Western States when I had stomach issues. And I was like, okay, we're going to keep going because I know it's going to get better eventually. And it sure did. So, yeah, I think it's like more of the resilience side of things that I think has like translated in all other aspects of my life. Did any of that resonate with you, Jonathan? I'm sure like
Yeah, all
none of these are like profound insights. Like, everyone knows this, but like if people just like reflect and think about oh, I could have seen how this could have helped me in this conversation with like my wife earlier today or my husband. Like it's like fundamental. And I don't think people reflect on that enough, personally.
Totally. And like half of my agenda with this podcast is to make that connection of you get to play in this sandbox where failure is okay and doesn't, end a relationship or end a job or end a something that like you don't want to end versus a race. Like if you fail at a race, it's a lesson and it's not going to ultimately like cause much material impact to your life. Whereas if you do a project and you fail miserably, like that could reflect poorly on your ability to get paid by that
Mm,
company. And so I like reminding people and having these conversations of like running is your sandbox to try and fail faster and learn about ultimately learn that you are capable. And it's not about I'm going to fail constantly. It's like I'm going to succeed and I'm going to show myself that I'm more capable than I could have imagined. There are two specific examples that come to mind for me. I had a meeting in person that I knew would be uncomfortable, and I was doing a run commute on the way to the office, and I chose 3 miles into my run to do an all-out mile. And I said, nothing else I do today will be as difficult as the next 5 minutes. And that was true, right? Like 2.5 minutes in, I was absolutely in a pain cave, like staring down the well. And 2.5 minutes beyond that, it was done. And that was 5 minutes and some seconds of extreme mental and physical discomfort. And when I sat down at the desk later that day to have that conversation, I was like, hey, that thing I just did was so much harder than what I'm about to do. I can do this. And then on the flip side, last Monday, we had to say goodbye to Alfie, which
mm,
is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And this past week has been the worst week of my life. And on Monday morning, I posted on Threads, I was like, what would you tell someone who's about to do the hardest thing that they've ever done? And half the people responded related to running. I was like, this is not a running question. Not everything is about running. Um, and the other, and a lot of people, and I appreciate those answers. It was great. Many of the people who responded listen to this podcast. So hello, thanks for your feedback. But a lot of the like quite useful guidance was basically like you've gotten through all of the hard things you've accomplished, you've struggled with so far. You will get through this, and you can kind of just sit in the suck also. Like
mm,
acknowledge that this is hard and acknowledge that this is going to be extremely painful. And these people didn't know what I was asking about. They didn't know that I was about to watch a dog go to sleep forever. It was awful. And I got through it, and I'm still getting through it, but it's that same, like, it was that same, okay, I'm lining up for a race. This is hard. I'm doing this thing. This is hard. But like I'm not still out there in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Like I finished that adventure, or like I finished the Grand Traverse. That was the longest race I'd ever done. Like all of the things that I've thought were really hard in the past, I've accomplished. And so
mm,
it's really empowering to go into something that's just like so brutal and drawing on strength that has enabled us to get through things before. So yes, what you said resonates like deeply.
Where my brain went when you shared that story is that, putting down, a loved, family member, a pet is like, it doesn't ever get easier if you've been through it once or twice or multiple times. So it's not like it, I imagine it's like was buffered because that you've been through a lot as a runner, but
Right.
it's familiar space. Like you have the tools to know how to navigate that versus someone
Right.
else
And
who
you
is like
know that
this.
it will pass.
Yes, exactly. That it will get better. Like you have that
Yeah.
confidence. So yeah, that makes sense.
Still waiting for it to get better, but
It's still
I know
fresh.
that it I
I'm
know
sorry
that
to
it
hear
will.
that. It's that's really painful. So
Yeah, it was truly awful, but also like such a beautiful experience. Like the guy that came over, he has his master's in psychology. He's a surgeon in a vet clinic. Just like a super interesting, extremely self aware and like aware of the surroundings. And I opened up the door. I was like, nice to meet you. He's like, it's not nice to meet me. You don't want to be meeting me.
Mm,
Just like really understood the energy. So, yeah, they're just amazing people out in the world, and like that was a an upside of this whole thing where like you get to watch someone do a thing that they are uniquely skilled at doing. And this guy was
mm,
sobbing at the same like while he was doing it too, but he was doing it. And anyway, we can do hard things is the
yeah, I
point.
don't know about how is that person like managing? Like he has to do this all day long, I imagine, to some effect, right? So, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Okay, changing topics because I can't think about that anymore. So injuries are something that we also are forced to deal with at times. We spoke a bit on the last podcast we did about navigating injuries and the ups and downs of a running journey. Over the years, that's been something that you and literally every runner ever has dealt with. So for someone who might be injured right now that's listening, like what guidance would you give to that person in navigating, the kind of the low points of a running
Mm,
journey?
this topic is challenging for me because I what I want to say is not what I do. As someone who I have like all these goals and what and I'm oftentimes if it's okay, so let's talk about injuries and how I break them down. There's like the injuries that are what we call the niggles that are there, they're present, but they don't fully prevent you from training, but they might manifest before, maybe a few times during, or most likely after. So that's like one category. Then there's another category of an injury where like you cannot function as a runner and you like literally cannot run for various reasons. So let's talk about camp two. When you're in camp two and you're out for the count, I would imagine thinking about ultra runners and runners who like want to move their body a lot. What's challenging is like being able to fulfill this endorphin rush that you live on every single day, but now don't get. And so it's figuring out how you can fulfill that still. I had I had like a bone spur removed over the summer and they like at right when it like got like my bone spur out, it was like the immediate of like I feel like I need to run, and I talked to my coach and he had to reaffirm to me that like Ryan, you're not losing fitness. It's okay to like chill out. Let's just like cycle for a couple days and then let's get back to running in like a week or two. And he was totally right. So it's really trying to like reframe that this is like a temporary thing and that you investing time is going to get better. So I've had to go through that multiple times and it's that transition period of like switching from running to something else is challenging. But I definitely feel like you need that person to like reassure to you that like this is fine and you have to think about the long-term picture. The first bucket, which this is the meatier more gray area and challenging is like the niggle camp, which I would probably argue a lot of people are experiencing. I don't really have good recommendation here, and I don't recommend what I did this last year, but I can share with you what I did. But I feel like, and this is kind of why I wish maybe more pros would talk about this because I always ask, are people like also like running and training with like something off all the time? And like, is that normal? Is that, or am I the abnormal one for doing this? So to give you an example, after Leadville last summer, I had this like really weird Achilles like tendonitis like flare up, and it was like a constant like up and down, and it pretty much existed all the way from like last fall until Western States. It magically just went away on race day at Western States this year and never came back. So
Wow.
but in between that time frame, what I was doing was not only doing like 18-hour training weeks, but I was getting shockwave therapy. I was doing a ton of strength training. I was like throwing everything at it. And it was like just buffering it enough, but it was still like lingering in the background. And so I share this example because you can, in my opinion, buffer it while still performing at the highest level, but I think it requires just so much effort. Like I was driving down to Massachusetts to this PT. It took like 2.5 hours round trip, getting shockwaves, spending all this money, doing all these things, taking stuff. It's like a lot, right? But I was willing to do that because I didn't want to sacrifice my training. And I had goals like getting into Western states, performing well at Western states. But I don't think that everyone should be doing that personally. Like it's just a lot of mental and physical energy spent. I think it's best to like hit the timeout button and like address the issue. That reminds me of one thing is, and Jonathan, I want to hear your perspective on this. Is like I tend to be someone who will throw things at problems really quickly, hoping that they solve them. But sometimes I don't take a step back and be like, okay, what is like the root cause here, and like what really actually is the problem? And I think I would encourage more people to do that and like take the time and energy. I know I'm speaking more broadly, but with my Achilles, maybe it's like, oh, maybe I am like, maybe it's a gait issue, and I'm like just solving the symptoms by like hitting it with wave, and maybe I do more mechanics. So I know I just dumped a lot on you, but any reactions to that?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shameless plug for the company I'm consulting and is sponsoring this podcast, which is Eternal. Eternal can do an entire movement and stability and strength and power assessment to understand root cause and if there are any nutritional components that are, vitamin D related to tendon health, and to give that full picture of, okay, as you move through a plane, what is your body actually doing, and how do you fix that? I've had this like nagging hip injury on and
Mm,
off for the last, I don't know, 5 years, and I'm dying to get in for like a full assessment and workup to really understand what's going on there. But yeah, you do have to find the root cause, and I too am, very quick to show up at the PT and get needled and go for 6 weeks once a week and then forget about it until it becomes a problem again. And that's just like it's not how it works as a 35-year-old. I
mm,
can't, like, I maybe I could do that when I was 25, but if I want to do this for, many more decades to come, I've got to stop like putting band-aids on problems and like actually do the strength training, actually do the mobility work, and all of the like supplemental stuff that we love to ignore.
mm. Yeah, that what you said right there, the supplemental. I actually would challenge you and reframe it from like supplemental because it makes it seem like it's optional versus
The
like
foundational.
it foundational and honestly critical. Something I'm getting into right now is, okay, this is going to sound so funny because I just discovered this, but toe yoga. You heard of toe yoga? I'm like getting
Yeah.
into it,
Kate
and
does it.
oh, does she? Okay, but like, just that is something fundamental. Is like moving your toes. This like neuromuscular development. But like on my right foot, I can do like this, but on my left foot, I can't. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like just from like the base of like running is like toe mechanics and neuromuscular relationship to our body. And if that's not optimized, then like we can run as much as we want and we're going to have like these issues. So, yes, critical work is part of the game, I would say.
You're gonna have to get back in the ultras with all the how strong your feet are getting then.
I know. Maybe I should like tell that to people. So everyone's like, "How do you run ultra marathons?" And it's like toe yoga.
Toe yoga. Okay, switching body parts to well, I guess it's not a body part. Many hats. You wear many hats. You're wearing the feed hat right now. We talked about this in our conversation in 2022 about you're not just a runner. You're not just a student. You're not just a insert, explanation there. Why do you think that's the path you've chosen? Whereas some pro athletes go all in one area and go super lopsided in that part of life.
Hmm. Yeah, this has been the question of my year, I would say. I think as someone who's an MBA student right now, it's one of my reasons for that was like this time of like reflection and intentionality and ensuring that like I am going down the paths that I want to go down. And something I've been reflecting on is Ryan, why don't you just like double down and be full-time athlete? Or Ryan, why can't you just be like a business professional and like why do you have to be an athlete? I've been like asking myself all those questions. And the conclusion I keep coming back to is that I think that I would be bored if I only did one thing. And it's not so much that it's like that it's boredom, it's the fact that I have so many interests and passions that I don't feel like I want to trade one or for the other. And so the past few years, and going back to our conversation in 2022, is is there a way that I can really do all things without compromising performance? And I would argue that I have been able to find a way to do that. I've been able to quote unquote have all these dimensions and have it all while still like maximizing performance. Sure, maybe I'm not at 100% optimized to be an athlete, but like 98% is pretty great. And this marginal benefit, how much of a benefit is that actually? Maybe I'm sacrificing some recovery, but there's other ways that I can pick and choose those battles on any given day. But something I've had to stomach, and for anyone who's listening who wears multiple hats, I think of people who are, pursuing sport and being a parent and have a day job. Like that's a classic example, is that there's always trade-offs. And I keep coming back to this conclusion for myself is, am I okay with these trade-offs? Put this into context of like me right now in business school. I came to business school knowing that I'm still pursuing running. And I knew that meant that I can't be 100% committed to like business school life, which it's like the parties, it's the social aspect as well. And I've like had to miss out on a lot of events. I've had to miss out on parties. I opt out of things. But that is a trade-off I'm willing to make in order to allow me to have my side business that I do on the side, to allow me to be an athlete, to allow me to do the advocacy work I do. Like I would rather not go to a party than to be able to have that. So I kind of do like this trade-off risk reward analysis like on daily basis. And I feel like I'm in alignment with like what my needs and wants are. And I think I just accept that there are these trade-offs. And that makes them really easy to like let go. It's almost like I'm not letting go, but I'm gaining something that's in alignment with me. So yeah, I feel like just aligned, honestly, at the end of the day, aligned to what I want.
Was it hard to get there, or was it like you tried to do it all 100% for all of it and you're like, this doesn't work. I'm going to drop a ball, too many balls kind of a thing?
I think it was hard, not in the sense of like actually doing it all, but hard in the sense that when you're managing multiple things, you have to be your number one advocate and you have to be incredibly fierce in advocating for yourself and communicating that to other people. So, I imagine like my classmates in school are like annoyed by me right now by saying like, we know Ryan, you're the runner, but I share this as an example because people know that I am a runner. People at work know that am a runner. Like I don't hide the intersectionality of who I am. And what that does is like when I communicate to someone like, hey, I need to take Thursday, Friday off because I want to travel for this race, they like understand it because they know how important it is. They know how integral running is into my life. So I think that's been the harder part is like, how do I fit all these different parts of this ecosystem of Ryan together to make them work together? And it's taught me that I have to enable all of them to like understand each other. Does that make sense? I think I'm speaking a bit abstract, but hopefully that
Yeah,
example of like telling everyone I'm a runner helps with that a bit.
it definitely makes sense. And do you think that that makes you more attractive from a brand standpoint in
When
partnerships?
you say brand, do we mean like athlete Ryan?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't, I don't have like a executive of, on running here to tell me that, but unless they're listening, hello. But I would say that my biggest, so okay, let me answer your question. The answer is yes, in my opinion. And I think it's been honestly one of the things that has frustrated me a lot with, partners of the past is that how I operate is like very business oriented. Like it's just like how I think. And I'm like always thinking about how to optimize and always thinking about all the dynamics at play. And I wish like people would use that more. And I think, or use me more to like help solve those problems.
What do you mean?
Like, for example, I bring the lens of the consumer. I am a consumer of goods, of running. I'm also an athlete, so I'm on the ground. I understand the needs of like a high performing athlete. But I'm also like my whole life, I've been a business professional in sales and strategy and consulting. Like I can solve a lot of the problems that companies face. And not that I'm an expert, but I like to think I'm a pretty good soundboard and a strategic thinker. So, I mean, like personally, I get value from like when I solve those problems. And
Right.
I wish people could capitalize on their athletes more to like help solve those problems. Like I'm sure there's other athletes that have skills that they can bring to the table and they don't. So I think that's a missed opportunity, but I do see that happening in other places. There's athletes that work on both the brand side and they also run professionally. So I think we're seeing that a bit more. But yeah, I definitely think it's an asset. But unsure what that looks like today.
I have a podcast coming out on Long Run Labs with Anton Krupicka
Oh,
about
cool.
his role as both an athlete and kind of brand strategist advisor. That's coming out on October 14th on Long Run Labs. So it'll be out by the time this comes out. Do you have that relationship with any of the brands that you're working with?
For sure. Yeah. When you say relationship, do you mean from like a business lens or what
Yeah.
relationship?
So more than just as an athlete.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I know leadership teams, decision makers, but sometimes I feel like they don't want it? And I think that's such a like missed opportunity. So I don't oftentimes like get the sense that they like want this. Or I remember like in the past, I like pitched a concept of like a go to market strategy. And I'm like, I'm really excited about this. Let me help you. I'm like very integrated with the product. I would love to figure out like, how do we figure out the right channel? And it just like it didn't feel like they really wanted it, but it was like, oh yeah, that could be nice. So yeah, it makes me like question that, am I like off base here or are they themselves like not thinking the way I'm thinking? You know what I'm saying? Like are they just
Yeah.
kind of like in a role and they're not thinking about the business? Not to like put it on them, but
Yeah, I think that there are just a lot of people who so a previous person I've worked with described like I hope I get this right and it sounds as intended. Employees are either chickens or pigs. And the chickens exist and they make eggs and they produce things, but the pigs get slaughtered. And so like somebody is kind of on the hook for making I'm like butchering, pun intended, the
I'm like, where is this
explanation
going?
of
I'm
this.
like really excited.
But like there are some people who are there just to do a job and there's not a lot of
Hmm.
repercussion for them, and those are the chickens. They can just do their thing and they produce
Hmm.
eggs, and they'll just do their thing and there's not much ramification if they get something wrong. Whereas the pigs, if they make a mistake or like that's it for the pigs. Sorry, vegans. And so I think about that dynamic a lot in people who are in environments where they're not inspired to take risks and they're
Hmm.
not comfortable enough in taking risks. Like, I love being in an environment where I can fail and where I have the cultural buy-in and support to like say something that might be wrong or might not like egregiously wrong or offensive, but like, nope, that's not the right strategy. Whereas, and the reason for that is because existing in these high trust environments is where innovation and excellence can happen. You can't be
Hmm.
excellent and you cannot innovate if you're not taking risks and if you're not pushing the envelope. And so I just think that there are a lot of people and brands that are not in that like comfort, and comfort is not the right word, but not in the place where they're enabled to take risks or go against status quo or go against the grain.
Hmm.
And they just exist to be chickens and do their job and show up and do their thing and that's that.
This topic, by the way, we can have a whole podcast on this. So you're gonna have to cut me off, Jonathan, eventually, but it's something I've observed in the outdoor industry, let's speak sports broadly, is that when I think about solving a problem or in my job, I have a narrow lens. So that means like execution. I execute my task, but I need a wide lens because I need to understand how my work
Big
impacts.
picture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to think big picture. Like, let's say I'm working on a new shoe design. Let's say I'm an engineer creating the shoe. I'm like narrow-minded. I'm like getting the best material. I'm finding it, blah, blah, blah. But like wide lens is like, I wonder how this affects like distribution, like what are the talking points that need to be, maybe I can help marketing with the talking points to like eloquently talk about this. Oh, also, the shoe is bigger, so that means it's going to have implications on our package. Like that's wide lens, and people are not good at that, in my opinion. And I think that's what I struggle with in this industry is like I'm working with people that are often narrow lensed, and I'm like, what if we like broke the wall down? Like, what if we did something innovative and people just don't feel empowered? And I think that is what I love in my work is like when I can break down barriers because nothing great has ever come from being narrow lensed, right? It all came from being wide lens and thinking like an ecosystem, thinking big. So yeah, I'm obviously you can tell I'm like energized by this because I think it's the biggest issue for you need talent that thinks that way. Not everyone needs to think that way, otherwise nothing will ever get done. But you need those people in the organization strategically placed, right?
Yeah, and it's super cool, and it's fun to see a team that's humming along where those players all exist, right? I'm doing consulting for Eternal, as we were talking about prior
Cool.
to the conversation, and the founder was an early product guy at Strava when there were 800 members, not employees, members. And then he started and sold The Athletic to the New York Times. And so like people love working for him. And this is the third company that many of them have been on together. And so it's like really cool to see an environment where there's such high trust and there's
Mm,
such an ability to like to do your job, but have that big picture understanding of like what are we trying to do here and what are we trying to disrupt, and there are nothing is off limits kind of a vibe.
mm.
And I think it's really rare to get that. We're going to have to do a Long Run Labs podcast, which is more on the business of the outdoor industry. But we could go an hour on this topic alone. I'm sure just like organizational structure and organizational strategy, and how do you motivate people and get the best out of
You
them. It's just
can't
like such
you
a
can't give me
fascinating.
this bait and then like say we can't talk about it. So I will
Okay, respond.
refrain. No I can't because now we're gonna go down this rabbit hole. But yeah.
It's okay.
Okay, one thing I want to say is that I think the one biggest takeaway I'm actively learning and applying in my life right now is that there is no right or wrong answer. It's always like a yes and. And so to kind of to your point about like how do we straddle multiple things? Like I think you need to like keep the engine running and like this is like core business, but then you need to like constantly have an innovation arm and allow people to like play in that arena. It's the same thing about ultra running. Like we like are constantly playing in this arena where I would call it like exploration mode. And then you have exploitation, which is like racing. That's when I'm like capitalizing on my exploitation during training, right? I think it's the same thing in business. Like we need to like have our core business and then you have an innovation arm that like falls on their face, but then like you find a product that is like badass and then you bring it over to the core business eventually. Sorry,
Yes.
total
Okay.
tangent.
We're gonna have to do a full tangent on a different podcast based on your experience in sales and organizational strategy and whatnot. But to bring it back to brands in the running space, another brand that we talk about a lot on this podcast, or will for the rest of this year, is Janji. And you are on Team Janji. They're sponsoring this podcast. I've known Mike and the team, there we go, since 2013, and have loved they're just chugging along. We see other brands come and go, and it's like old reliable Janji is right there, doing their thing and getting further and further into trail running. I think Mike is running Kodiak this weekend, so can't wait to follow along with how that goes. But what excited you about that brand, and what is
Mm.
it like partnering with that brand?
Yeah, I remember when, Janji and team, Mike, Kyla is the athlete manager for Janji. They approached me 2 years ago and they came to me by saying, we are really serious about signing more high performance athletes. And they, number one, like came out of the gates with a competitive offer, which, just speaks to like how serious they were. And so I really appreciated that. But I also felt like I really resonated to the brand. Not that like my platform or what I speak to is advocating for water access and water rights and clean water. Like I care about those things, but it's not something I am intimately involved in. I think the whole thing that John G as an ethos is very inclusive. They intentionally have signed a bunch of different athletes that represent a lot of different communities in our sport. And so I saw that as like, wow, these people are quite intentional in creating this community. And I love that. But also just because they had this clean water initiative signals to me that like they care more about other things than running their business too, and they can do business and also leave an impact. And that's kind of how I operate in my life, is that yeah, I can run and I can make a living from it and I can do all these things, but I also want to give back because it's important to me. And so I just felt like our whole ethos and how we operated was quite aligned. So it's been a really good like athlete brand fit. And then I would say thirdly is that Janji's size is quite appealing to me as well. There's nothing wrong with, working with a large business. If anything, that's better because there's more resources potentially. But for me, I think I thrive really well when it's like small, medium size, where I feel like I can be quite integrated with the business versus having like more layers of bureaucracy or red tape. So for me, being able to have access to Mike and team directly on a texting basis is really meaningful to me because it feels like like I feel like I am the brand, right? And that's kind of what you want out of an athlete.
And you can feel it like you have the ability to make an impact, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're partnering with a big global brand, like unless you do certain things over a long period of time, it's very hard to like feel like you matter in that ecosystem. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like it's a way to everybody needs shoes, everybody needs apparel. Like these are components of running that are necessities. I did a sponsorship with Janji in 2020. It was my second sponsor ever, and then back with them again this fall after like a weekend with Mike and at a race in Aspen. And it's just like fun to work directly with the CEO of a company on building a brand partnership versus. And again, there's nothing wrong with working with a brand marketer whose job is to do partnerships. Like there are, it's just fun when you and a different experience when you have the ear of the CEO and there's a bit more gravity to the relationship.
Yeah, there's less of a game of telephone, right? I think you
Right.
probably can experience this, but there's like sometimes a disconnect between that brand manager and like
Right.
their leader and their leader's leader, right? But like here you get to work directly with the person who's setting the vision, right? And I think that's, yeah, to your point, fun, but also just makes things easier too.
Yep. What is your favorite product and why is it the men's half tights?
Oh, wait, are you answering the question for
That
me?
that's my favorite, and they are fantastic. I ran Grand Traverse in them 9 hours, no chafe. If anyone
Nice.
has not tried Janji, give their half tights a try first.
Well, before you answered the question for me, Jonathan, I was also going to say the half tie. It's something I've been using even before I was signed as a John G athlete. It's just like like a no BS straightforward, but also incredibly useful tool that I use like on a daily basis. So, love the pockets. I don't always share photos from my runs, but I literally take a photo or video on my run every single day, and having that pocket on the right hand side just makes it like really accessible and it doesn't bother me. But I've actually been getting like more into the athleisure products that Janji has in their like portfolio. And honestly, like one of my favorites is like they have like a cotton blend t-shirt that they advertise as like a running shirt, and it definitely is, but I wear it more of like a casual shirt because it's like stretchy and loose and comfortable. And so yeah, that's actually something I wear all the time is that t-shirt.
And you're wearing it right now for those who
No,
are
this is actually
listening. Yeah.
the no, this
Oh,
is the all day lawn sleeve actually. And this is like the polyester one. So this is actually
got it.
like a quick drying. So
Got it. I'm going to go back to something you said and use it as a segue to another topic. You mentioned that they had intentionality around having a diverse group of athletes. What's cool about their catalogs and whatnot, unlike some other brands that we won't name, the people buying the product are also diverse. It's not just like let's put a bunch of diverse people in the catalog so that we look like we're a diverse company. That like their customers are actually diverse and represent different communities. Let's talk about the intersectionality a little bit more and your passions and pursuits in the LGBTQ community and helping people feel represented and like they belong there. Tell me more about that and how do you do what you do and enable people to feel like they belong because they do.
yeah, for sure. We've been talking about inclusion for a while now, and depending on where you're at in your journey, you can be someone who's, yes, inclusion is great, it's important. You might also be in the camp of like, wow, I'm really tired of hearing this. Like, the trail is so inclusive, and, we don't need to focus on that. Depending on where you're at, like, all of that might be true, but there also is another truth because what I can tell you is, as someone who's in the queer community and someone who has a very large community in the space, what I hear is that they do not feel included all the time, and that we need to continually find ways to make space for queer people. So whether you agree with it or not, I just want to share examples of, these are real-time stories that I hear all the time that tell me that there's still work to be done. I want to share, I guess, one thing that I do, and something that I felt that as I've grown as an athlete is that I have this opportunity to build a community. And so 4 years ago, I remember I was like waffling back and forth of like, how do I want to do like this event that's like only for queer people, but I don't really know if anyone's gonna come. And I remember I was like so scared to like get it done. And someone was like, Ryan, there's never gonna be like a great time. And sure, you probably are going to fail, but you just need to get it started and things will just like naturally fall into place. And that could not have been more true. So it's not something I do every single day, but something that I've realized that has been helpful for me is to like just be around other people like me in trail settings. So I have been organizing this annual running retreat just for queer people. And from getting feedback from this community is that financial barriers is like a big problem for people. So I have leveraged my network, my brand relationships to pool money to a scholarship fund. And the scholarships then create a no cost experience for people in the trail community. So trying to like hit all the needs of the community. So, community building, removing the financial barrier, just like trying to get all those needs down. I just came back from that actually this last weekend in Washington State. And I wish everyone on this podcast and I wish everyone in this world could just like be a fly in the wall in this place because it is truly magical. We like take over this little lodge. We're all sleeping in bunks upstairs. So it's a very like intimate experience, but the environment we create is like this joy that I don't experience for the rest of this year. I don't know how to like put words behind it, but it's truly just like joyful, and it's an environment. Or actually going back, Jonathan, to what you previously said is like creating this we were talking about a work example, but I would call it like psychological safety or like permission.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was just like oozing from the environment. Like people just showed up. If someone used the wrong pronoun, they were like, "Oh, it's fine. Like this is how I like to present." And people are like, "Okay, that's great." It just like was so wonderful and supportive. And I wish we could have more of that where people could just like be silly but also serious at the same time. And the stories I heard of like how transformative this space was for people just like is what gets me motivated to want to do it more and more and more. So yeah, that's just like a little anecdote of, what I'm trying to do on at least a micro scale, I would say.
Yeah, and it's cool to see races beginning to participate. Like Broken Arrow this year, like there are events that say they're for everyone, and then there are events that, well, you tell me. Like, how did you feel at Broken Arrow?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Broken Arrow is doing amazing work in terms of giving bibs out to clubs that represent these intersectional diversity, giving airspace to them, creating divisions for people to present themselves at face value. For example, they have a non-binary division. But I say that because I want to celebrate, but I also want to say like yes, and there's still like a lot of other things that we can work on and improve upon. So depending on like where people are at in their journey, I want to like celebrate journey and progress. So
Makes sense. If someone's listening and they want to get involved in that aspect of what you do, where can they find more information?
yeah, I would say the biggest thing about out trails is that because the biggest lever that we want to enable is reducing financial challenges for people, but like putting on a retreat in like a remote part of Washington just like has costs.
Fairly
I don't
expensive.
I don't pay myself. I'm doing this all on volunteer. So all the money that I crowdsource, either from brands or directly from people, goes towards our programming. So if people want to support Out Trails, we receive donations from as little as a couple bucks to a few hundred if you want. We have a PayPal account and you can just like drop a donation there and it will go directly to Outrails. So that's on the Outrails front. And then also, if you just want to follow my work, just my social media, I usually talk about running, gay stuff, school, and all the different hats I wear. So.
Amazing. Ryan, this has been a blast. We are going to have to do a Long Run Labs podcast more on the
Ooh,
business
yes.
side of the outdoor industry. But until then, appreciate everything you bring to the space.
Yeah, thank you for having me.